All right, welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're unpacking a massive, comprehensive guide to AI law, ethics, and governance. Look, if you're building, buying, or honestly just paying attention to the future of artificial intelligence, you already know this tech is moving at absolute warp speed. But mastering the code? Yeah, that's just not enough anymore. We literally need a roadmap for how to govern the whole shebang. Okay, let's dive into this. The source material hits us with a pretty powerful thought. True AI evolution isn't just about massive parameter counts or faster chips. It relies entirely on the knowledge to govern it correctly. To really harmonize AI with society, we have to look through the lens of what we're calling the Trinity, a delicate balance of technology, law, and ethics. Think of it like a three-legged stool. If you ignore just one of those pillars, the whole system collapses. So here's our roadmap for today. First, foundational legal frameworks. Second, AI contracts and practices. Third, ethics and global governance. And finally, security and societal impact. Let's get right into it.
Starting with Chapter 1, Foundational Legal Frameworks, Setting the Rules.
The absolute first step in any AI project is wrapping your head around the rigid rules for data gathering. Japan, for example, has this incredibly unique regulation where reproducing data specifically for AI training often doesn't actually require explicit permission from the copyright holder. I mean, that's a massive advantage for developers, right? But it absolutely comes with strict boundaries. Then you've got patents to protect inventions and the Unfair Competition Prevention Act. If you want to protect your AI tech as a trade secret under that act, it has to hit 3 strict criteria: secrecy, utility, and a non-public nature. You can't just call it a secret. You have to actively manage it as one. And of course, anti-monopoly laws step in to make sure the major players aren't using their data dominance to unfairly crush competition. Now, you might be wondering, how do we actually handle user data? Well, you got to clearly differentiate between opt-in, meaning you get explicit consent beforehand, and opt-out, which assumes implied consent unless the user actively says no. Getting this mixed up can literally kill an AI project on day one. You also have to know exactly what kind of data you're holding. Is it anonymized, meaning it's mathematically impossible to reverse engineer who it belongs to? Or is it pseudonymized, where you could potentially identify someone if you had an external key? And man, if you're dealing with highly regulated stuff like financial records or location data, the rules get significantly tighter. And speaking of tight rules, we absolutely have to talk about Europe. The EU's General Data Protection Regulation, GDPR, is still one of the strictest global standards out there. Under GDPR, even an IP address is classified as personal information. It also gives people the explicit right to refuse decisions made entirely by automated processing. So if your AI denies someone a loan, that user has the right to demand a real human look at it. The good news? Japan currently holds an adequacy decision with the EU, which means there's a recognized, safe framework for legal data transfer between the two regions, as long as you play by these strict rules. Let's move to and see how this builds into Section 2. AI contracts and practices, building the system. So how do you actually draft agreements when the technology itself is, by nature, unpredictable? If you've ever wondered why your AI vendor won't guarantee perfect accuracy, well, this is exactly why. In traditional software development, you'd usually use a contract for work. The vendor guarantees a finished product and promises it'll be perfectly accurate. AI simply doesn't work like that. Because machine learning is probabilistic, it's based on probabilities, you just cannot guarantee a 100% accurate output every single time. Because of that, AI development relies heavily on what's called quasi-mandate contracts. These focus on the diligent execution of tasks and the effort put into the development process, rather than legally promising a totally flawless end result. Because of that unpredictability, the standard real-world workflow of an AI project is broken into distinct phases. You definitely don't just sign one massive overarching contract. You start with an assessment phase. Can AI even solve this problem? Then you move to a proof of concept, or POC, to test a small-scale model. Only if that POC is actually successful do you move into full development. And here's the kicker. Each one of these steps requires its own carefully drafted quasi-mandate agreement. To help navigate this maze, Japan's Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, or METI, stepped up and provided standard contract templates. They basically break it down into 3 types. The provision type, where data is simply handed over. the creation type for collaborative data generation, and the platform type for multi-party sharing. Look, in a brand new field with hardly any legal precedent, relying on these standardized templates and clearly defined SaaS terms of use is hands down your best defense against messy, costly disputes later on. It gets everyone on the exact same page about who owns the data and who owns the trained model. Moving right along to Section 3, Ethics and Global Governance, Earning Trust. Now we're shifting from the rigid, black and white requirements of the law to the flexible, constantly evolving world of ethics. Because, let's be real, just being legally compliant doesn't automatically mean society's going to trust you. Governing AI globally requires a hybrid approach. On one side, we have hard law. These are strict, legally binding rules, like the new EU AI Act, which can slap you with massive fines for noncompliance. On the other side, there's soft law. Think flexible guidelines, OECD recommendations, and corporate social principles. To navigate this globally, organizations use a risk-based approach, blending both hard and soft laws depending on what the AI actually does. A low-risk customer service chatbot, that might only need soft law guidelines. But a high-risk medical AI, that requires hard law compliance and rigorous third-party audits to build real, robust governance. Right at the heart of this ethical framework is a concept called FATS, Fairness, Accountability, and Transparency. This is absolutely crucial. If your training data is skewed, like, say, it completely lacks representation of certain demographics, that algorithmic bias is going to scale rapidly. Without continuous monitoring, this can lead to severe, real-world social discrimination in things like hiring, lending, or even law enforcement. You have to be accountable for the outputs, ensure fairness in the model itself, and remain transparent about how it's actually working. And this brilliantly illustrates our next point, XAI, or explainable AI. As these systems get more complex, they naturally turn into these opaque black boxes, where sometimes even the developers themselves don't fully understand how the AI reached a specific conclusion. Well, XAI is technology specifically designed to crack open that black box and explain the decision-making process in terms humans can actually understand. When you combine XAI with public transparency reports, it gives users a massive amount of peace of mind regarding where the data came from and the logic behind the algorithms. Which brings us to our final chapter, Section 4, Security and Societal Impact, the Big Picture. Okay, let's zoom out and look at what happens when these incredibly powerful systems are actually launched out into the wild. When you deploy AI, you're suddenly facing entirely new categories of threats. We're not just talking about your standard hacking anymore. We're dealing with adversarial attacks, where bad actors subtly alter inputs to cause dangerous misrecognitions. Imagine tricking an autonomous car into seeing a stop sign as a speed limit sign. Terrifying, right? Then there's data poisoning, where attackers sneak false information into the training set to corrupt the AI from the inside out. And on a societal level, we're up against the massive threat of deepfakes and AI-driven filter bubbles that just polarize us even further. Since zero risk is statistically impossible, a security by design mindset has to be baked in from the very first line of code. But beyond those immediate security threats, there are some really profound global impact discussions happening right now at the absolute highest levels. Environmentally speaking, training these massive AI models requires staggering amounts of electricity, not to mention the thousands of gallons of water just to keep the data centers cool. The environmental cost is immense. Furthermore, on a geopolitical level, we are seeing incredibly complex and cautious global discussions regarding the development and deployment of lethal autonomous weapons. These are heavy, sweeping issues that are honestly going to define international relations for the next century. So how do companies navigate this absolute minefield? They have to establish ironclad AI corporate governance. This means defining extremely clear responsibility, knowing exactly who is legally and ethically on the hook if the AI goes rogue or fails. It requires full traceability and daily documentation of the entire development process. And crucially, it demands diversity and inclusion within the development teams themselves. Building strong internal controls and maintaining a human-centric design philosophy are exactly what protect companies from massive public backlash, prevent corporate scandals, and ultimately ensure that the AI serves humanity and not the other way around. To wrap things up, I want to leave you with a concept known as ELSI, Ethical, Legal, and Social Issues. It's a framework that challenges developers to look way beyond just the bare minimum of legal compliance. It asks one really fundamental question. Is your AI designed to merely follow the law, or is it actively designed to earn society's trust? Because at the end of the day, an AI system that checks all the legal boxes but is socially destructive simply won't survive. By balancing technology, law, and ethics from day one, we can build AI that is both incredibly powerful and profoundly trustworthy. Thanks so much for joining me on this deep dive, and I really hope this helps you build better, safer systems.